Good evening. I'll welcome you once again to Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. I'm Reverend David Wiggs, Senior Pastor here. We're so glad that you've come to this four parts on our Holy Conversations this month around human sexuality in the United Methodist Church. We've had 3 great sessions. We have one more in store for you this evening. I see many of you came in with your Holy Conversations Series 2017 Holy Conversation Guideline card. That's so important, I think, that we learn about this. Reminding you that we say our foundations are that all people are children of God, the love of God and love of neighbor are at the center of all we do here. Then on the reverse side, that suggests that for our Holy Conversations, we will honor the sacred worth of all persons, seek to do no harm, respectfully listen to learn, explore the sources of our differences with goodwill, and at all times be kind, as together we humbly seek the mind of Christ to do the will of God in all we say and do. When we keep that in mind, our discussions are more fruitful and our experience together more effective. We appreciate you observing those as we move through this evening. My apologies if you weren't here last week. We talked about United Methodism, particularly as a denomination in human sexuality. We gave you some feedback forms. There were lots of questions, but there's just 3 or 4 that I can answer real quickly that I wanted to address tonight. A couple of them are about the process of how the United Methodist Church is moving forward. I'm going to answer those just briefly, and then we'll move into our prayer and our introduction of our speaker this evening. One question was, how can the member of each congregation be involved in the process of changes within the United Methodist Church? And then there was another one about where to find the report that the Commission on the Way Forward will be bringing, and another one on updates on the national conversation of the United Methodist Church and the Commission on the Way Forward and how that will affect us. So just so you know, 32 members were appointed. They're meeting regularly. They will be issuing a report later this spring. As soon as that is out, I'll make the congregation aware of that. If they give us permission to post that on our website, which I think they will because it should be a public document then, we'll make that available. I'll tell you about it. Maybe we'll even have a holy conversation or 2 of our own around what they're suggesting. There's a 10-month kind of simmering period that has to be available before the actual special general conference, which will happen in late February 2019 in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you want to be involved in that, you can write your bishop. You can get the names or addresses of the people on the commission, and you can write them. They are from around the globe. Another one of the questions was, are there any people from Africa on this commission, United Methodists from Africa? The answer is yes, there are some Africans on the commission. I think it's a couple of the African bishops were the people who were representing Africa, but I don't know that for certain. I would have to check. There may be others as well with those groups. So just those few kind of details of housekeeping in terms of how this is going to proceed. And we will keep you posted. And as soon as I have information, I'll be sharing that with the congregation and any of you all that might be more interested in what's going on with all that process. Our youth have been great to be a part of this. They've helped us with technology. They've had a table full of young people at every conversation so far, and 2 of them are going to come and do our opening prayer tonight, Allison McMurray and Douglas Perry. If you'll come now and lead us, they'll open us with prayer this evening.
Our prayer tonight is the companion litany to the social creed of the United Methodist Church.
God in the Spirit revealed in Jesus Christ calls us by grace
To be renewed in the image of our Creator, that we may be one in the divine love for the world.
Today is the day God cares for the integrity of creation, wills the healing and wholeness of all life, weeps at the plunder of earth's goodness.
And so shall we.
Today is the day God embraces all hues of humanity, delights in diversity and difference, favors solidarity, transforming strangers into friends.
And so shall we.
Today is the day God cries with the masses of starving people, despises growing disparity between rich and poor, demands justice for workers in the marketplace.
And so shall we.
Today is the day God deplores violence in our homes and streets, rebukes the world's warring madness, humbles the powerful, and lifts up the lowly.
And so shall we.
Today is the day God calls for nations and peoples to live in peace, celebrates where justice and mercy embrace, exults when the wolf grazes with the lamb. And so shall we. Today is the day God brings good news to the poor, proclaims release to the captives, gives sight to the blind, and sets the oppressed free. And so shall we. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Well, we're so pleased for our presenter to be with us tonight. Moises Echeverria is, as I said this morning, one of our newest members here at Boston Avenue. So that was fun last week to have the privilege of being a part of that. Known Moises for a long time. He's now the president and CEO of the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice, or what you may have heard of as OCCJ. But before he took that role, he had lots of experience with that organization. I think he might tell us more about this, but as a teenager, he had experiences with OCCJ and the Anytown Camp that was started years ago when Nancy Day, who's also a member here, was the president and CEO of OCCJ, even though we didn't call it that at the time. It was the same organization. I was youth minister back in those days. We had the young people from this church at the very first Anytown Camp, where they were learning more about diversity and how to get along with one another and how to get along with people who were different, and how do we learn to understand those differences and appreciate them and value each other. After Moises had those experiences, he stayed active with OCCJ as a volunteer, went back as a counselor to a whole series of Anytown camps. Nancy Day then at one point called him after he graduated, asked him to come and work for OCCJ, became the program director, was very effective in that role, and worked with a whole variety of all the programming that OCCJ does. I'm not going to go into all that they do, but they're very active in our community, and particularly in our schools, working with young people on a whole variety of programs around diversity. So he's been a strong advocate, educator in Oklahoma to help people learn how to respect others and honor human rights of all people. He's literally touched hundreds, if not thousands, of lives with his work as a volunteer, then as the program person, and as the president of the organization. He also volunteers a lot of his time around town with a variety of organizations. He's on the board for the Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Society, the Tulsa Area United Way, the Community Health Connections Board, the Oklahoma Commission of the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights. He's chair-elect for TIPROS. If you're not familiar with them, that's one of the largest organized young professional groups in the nation. They're very active here in Tulsa in terms of economic development and making Tulsa a more livable city, helping people explore different parts of Tulsa. A great organization. Other Boston Avenue members are a part of that and have been leaders in that. So we're excited that he's going to continue that legacy and our connection with that group as they work around the city. He's also on the Community Advisory Committee of Tulsa Public Schools, on the Board of Directors of Tulsa Honor Academy. He grew up here in Tulsa, graduated East Central High School, and went on, many of y'all will love this, to Oklahoma State University. See a few of these. Earned his bachelor's there in business administration. He's a delight to know. He's such a wonderful person. But the fact that he's decided to give his life to this city and for this work is a blessing to us all. Let's give a warm Boston Avenue welcome to Moises.
Thank you so much. It's truly my pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm sure most of you know that every major religion around the world has, in essence, a version of the Golden Rule. And for us, the Golden Rule is do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And this past month, you've had the opportunity to listen from people, talk about their experiences in regards to their identity and finding out who they are and their journeys and life journeys, and also folks in learning about their journeys in regards to gender identity. And also, by way of introduction, my pronouns are he, him, his. I know that's on your name tags, and that's important for this series this month. And so, although the Golden Rule is phenomenal and a wonderful way for us to be more inclusive, and I mean, really, in reality, if we think about the whole world practicing the Golden Rule, it would be a much better place to live. But the Golden Rule falls short when we consider the differences between cultures, the difference between generations, between genders, etc. And for the purpose of this evening, the example of personal pronouns, we at OCCJ often talk about the Planum Rule. And so I'm going to share with you what the Planum Rule says, and I'm going to see if you catch what the caveat, the difference is. So the Planum Rule that we teach to students in our programs is treat others how they want to be treated. So what was the difference there? It's about them. It's not about how I want to be treated, because in my home, in my culture, in my upbringing, I may have learned that to be respectful, I had to look at someone in the eyes when I was talking to them. But in other cultures and traditions, that may be seen as a sign of disrespect. So that's just a very small example to explain why it's important for us to get to know each other. And to learn how we view respect, and how we feel respect, and how we express respect. So, in regards to personal pronouns, I remember the very first time that I met an individual who used they, them, theirs pronouns. And I must admit that it was very hard for me to get used to referring to an individual in this who's a singular person in the plural pronoun. And it took a couple of years, to be honest, for that to flow normally out of me. But what made the difference for me in being able to address this person in their personal pronoun was that I knew that person, and that I had grown to respect and to admire that person. That person had helped me and taught me and to grow, and I wanted to make sure that if I could change something so small within me that was going to help them feel respected, that I would do that. And so when we talk about cultural competence, it boils down to respect, and not necessarily treat others how we want to be treated, but understanding and being curious and inquiring about how others want to be treated, and if it's something that we can do within to show respect to others, and doing that. Now, I also want to talk about lenses. And every time that we engage in conversations, that we interact with others, we bring with us a lens. And so the next slide is going to be a picture of some animals. And before I change to the next slide, I'm going to ask you to identify the very first animal that you recognize, okay? Okay, so I heard grasshopper, wolf, butterfly, spider, horse, okay, bee. All right, so I saw this on social media about 6 weeks ago, and there was a test to see what animal individuals saw first. And then, depending on the animal that you saw first, it told you your personality. Now, I'm not going to tell you what your personalities are, because I don't know how scientific that was. But in this image, there are 9 animals here. There's a stallion, there's a rooster, a crab, and I don't know if you can see those now that they're listed: a praying mantis, a wolf, dog, eagle, butterfly, and a dove. Now, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, gender identity, sexuality, cultural competence, all of us come into these conversations, into these spaces, with each other, with our own lenses that we've acquired through our upbringing, through our circles of social circles, through media, society, and it's important for us to explore and understand what our lens is and why it was developed the way that it was developed, so that we can have meaningful interactions with others in a respectful way. Now, for tonight, I'm not going to stand here and lecture to you for an hour and a half, even though I could do that. There's going to be some interactions and conversations in your groups, and so this evening is going to be more meaningful if there are full tables. So we're going to do an exercise that I'm going to explain in a second. And after the exercise, I invite those of you who are sitting in tables that have less than 4 people to come and sit and fill the other tables. But we are going to, in order for us to have these conversations with each other, I want to emphasize the guidelines that Reverend Moises has established for this series, which I think if we can all agree to abide by these guidelines, then we're going to have a successful time this evening. So, on this Holy Conversation series, we agree to honor the sacred worth of all persons, even if we disagree with them. Seek to do no harm. So if we are curious about something and we are interested in asking a question of clarification, let's seek to phrase that question in a way that is not going to harm the other. Respectfully listen to learn. So if we disagree with someone, rather than challenging them and debating with them, let's ask questions of clarification. Let's try to get to the root of why that person thinks, feels that way. Explore the sources of our differences with goodwill, and at all times, be kind. So, before we do the activity, I have to bring light to what was shared in response to the Charlottesville protest a couple of months ago. So if you recall, there was a group of white nationalists who gathered to give light to the ideology of superiority. And because of that, there was a group of counter-protesters, and there was someone who was killed because a vehicle was driven into the crowd, and it was one of the white nationalists who drove their vehicle into the crowd and harmed a lot of people and killed one. So Bishop Ah, who is the president of Council of Bishops in the United Methodist Church, said the following. I was really impressed by his words. Jesus called his followers to love your neighbor. It is clear this key spiritual imperative means all neighbors without regard of race, color, religion, or national origin. And Paul taught us that enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, and factions are among many works of the flesh that are antithetical to the kingdom of God. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These works of the Spirit lead to peacemaking in the kingdom of God. And then he continues and says, we share collective responsibility as followers of the Prince of Peace to create non-violent communities where people with different political and religious views respect each other. We share responsibility to articulate the vision of the beloved community where no person feels endangered on account of their social, racial, or cultural identity. So, in essence, this is why we engage in these conversations. This is why we learn about ourselves, about each other, so that we can stand up and create the vision of the beloved community. Okay, so I've been talking a lot already, and I don't want to put you to sleep since the lights are dimmed. It just makes it the nice ambience. So we're going to do an activity, and I'm going to give all the instructions, and I'm going to stay put until I'm finished with the instructions. But it's a simple activity that you do in pairs. Now, I encourage you to pair up with someone that you're not very familiar with. It doesn't have to be a complete stranger, although it cannot be your spouse if you're here with your spouse. And the activity is called the most unusual, and so what is going to happen is you're going to have about 4 minutes, and I'll keep time and give you a 1-minute warning. But once you're paired up, the goal is for you to figure out what is the most unusual thing that you have in common with each other. Okay? So whether you had 5 dogs growing up and they were all named with candy, no, just whatever the most unusual thing. You traveled to different continents, you visited some of the same cities, you were named after a grandparent in their middle name, etc., etc. You get the idea. So, again, we're going to have about 4 minutes for you to ask questions and to figure out what the most unusual thing you share in common is, and we'll come back and we'll report back and try to figure out what is the most unusual thing that someone in this room has. But when we come back, again, I want to remind you and encourage you that if you're sitting at a table of less than 4 people, then when we come back, you sit and join another table to make it more full. Okay? So you have 4 minutes to go and pair up, and we'll come back in 4 minutes. Thank you. I have to say that it's nice to see everyone get so energized and sharing and learning with each other. Alright, so who in here thinks that they have the most unusual thing in common out of everyone in this room? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have one in the back. Who else? I'm going to change my... Okay, so who here thinks that they have something very unusual in common that they would like to share with the room? Okay, so we'll go over here.
We both love Williamsburg. We'd love to live in Williamsburg.
Okay. Very good, very good. Okay, so it's over here.
So, we both love and prefer to listen to classical music, specifically classical music by Mahler.
Okay. Wow, that's very specific. Okay. Okay, another hand over here.
We're 2 farm girls, and we had like a traveling circuit preacher type thing, and went to MYF and church camp.
Okay. Wow. Okay, a couple more hands.
We both have hiked to above 14,000 feet, and we both have stayed at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park.
We both have ancestors from the Isle of Skye.
Okay, very good. Can I get some hand over here?
We both played three sports in high school: football, basketball, and track.
Wow, okay.
We're talking
Say that again. Get the mic, please.
football, basketball, and track. Both of us played those three sports.
Okay, very good. Okay, anybody else wants to share with the group? Okay. We have a couple more hands. The mic is going to you.
Elaine and I have been to England, Mexico, Canada, Italy, Switzerland, France, South Korea, Germany, and Jamaica, but not together or at the same time.
World travelers.
Mr. Gibbs and I have both eaten breadfruit in Tahiti.
Very good. And there was one right here in the middle, Jennifer.
We have each lived abroad and can say that we know more than 10 people from 10 different countries.
Okay, very cool, very cool. All right, well, thank you everyone so much for participating, for sharing. Now, was this something easy for some of you? Was it easy for some of you? Why was it easy? Why was that? So you already knew them, you've been around them, seen them, yeah?
I think it was the attitude of openness. We didn't know each other. It's the first time we met. And just the willingness to be open to listening.
Yeah,
Just that attitude.
Thank you.
Willingness.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to talk about that in just one second. But there's something about the spirit of a community and whether a community is open to engage in conversations and getting to know each other. Thank you so much for saying that. Anybody else? Was it easy for you and why? Okay, was it hard for anyone?
Yes.
Okay, I want to hear the whys. Why was it hard for some of you?
Yeah, so we just kept on like going through stuff and we had nothing. We had nothing. And so it was just like we were trying some things, but it was just kind of like we're trying to throw out the most random stuff we could. And so it's like when you don't have that grounding space, you didn't know where to begin.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard just going out there and the most unusual. That can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. And so, although if I were to say find the most common things to share in common, we will come up with a long list, but there was a reason why we went with the most unusual. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was another hand over here on this side that was difficult to still want to share.
I wish we would have had more time.
Okay, so time. 4 minutes is not a lot of time to get to know someone. Okay, very good. So this exercise is fun, but it also has a purpose. And it highlights how with the right atmosphere and the right timing and the right questions, we can find a lot of things that we share in common. We can find common ground. You have probably heard the phrase, building bridges. You know, we need to build bridges between communities, build relationships. And that idea becomes obsolete when we realize that we stand on common ground, that we have a lot of things that we share in common. And I'm not trying to minimalize our differences, because our differences are important and they shape who we are and they give meaning to our experiences, but we also have a lot of common ground, and oftentimes we cannot even get to that point. And so we have this idea of building bridges and reaching out, and once we do, then we realize that we are standing on common ground. So I want to talk a little bit about cultural competence and what it means, to make sure that we're all on the same page. So cultural competence is the idea that an individual, an organization, an institution has the right attitudes, tools to engage in communication, in behaviors across cultures. And the word culture is used because it's so broad, and it refers to beliefs, values, thoughts, actions, costumes, and they expand in different realms of including racial, ethnic, religious, and social groups. So cultural competency gained popularity a few decades ago when companies started going international and we became more and more global, a global economy. And there was a business case for people to be cultural competent. And although whenever we engage in cultural competency conversations, it's often focused on the self and the skills that we need to interact with people who are different than us, it's also important to emphasize that organizations and institutions can be culturally competent. And so, kind of to what was mentioned earlier about the spirit of being inclusive. And so there's 5 elements for institutions to be culturally competent, and the first one is valuing our diversity, valuing our differences, understanding that we have common ground, but how we differ is beautiful and it enriches our lives. Having the capacity for cultural self-assessment, so the conversation earlier about lenses, and understanding why we think the way that we think. What upbringing, what life experiences have we had that have shaped how we view different situations, topics, etc. Being conscious of the dynamics inherent with cultures interact, understanding that there are differences when I speak with you and I come here and I have an accent, versus if I didn't have an accent. And so how do those differences affect how we interact, or different cultures interact? Having institutional and cultural knowledge and having developed adaptations to service delivery, reflecting an understanding of cultural delivery. So being able to adapt to be able to interact with others who are different. So it is important when we're engaging in conversations across cultures and across different groups for us to have a basic understanding of different terminology and topics and ideas. And rather than me standing here and going through a bunch of slides of definitions, which there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in regards to cultural competency, especially as it relates to sexuality and gender identity, what I want us to do next is to do another group activity, but this time it's going to be with our table. And so on your table is a paper binder with some words and their definitions. And these are all words that relate to the conversations that we had this past 4 Sundays. And so your charge is for your group to go through each word and its definition and match it. Match the definition to the correct definition to the right word. You'll have 12 minutes to do this. So it's not a lot of time, there's a lot of definitions, and so we have 12 minutes to ask questions, to engage with each other, and put all the correct definitions with their words, and then we'll come back and ask some questions. Okay, can I have everyone's attention, please? Okay, very good. All right, so how was that? Awesome, I heard awesome over there. Okay, so I have to say that I was very impressed. There was 3 groups who finished at the exact same time, it seemed like. And I say that for those of you who did not notice, there was some competition, and some folks wanted to be the first. They wanted to be the ones who finished first, and so I didn't check to see who finished first, but there's no prize. But there was about 3 or 4 groups who finished just about at the same time. All right, so let's come back together and let's talk about this now. This is a critical piece in regards to inclusion work and cultural competence, is having a joint definitions and the shared definitions on issues, shared understanding. Because when I say ally, for example, which is one of the words that you had, my mind automatically, because of the lens that I have, think of an individual or characteristics of what an ally is. And when I say ally, Reverend Wicks may have some slightly different definition and idea of what an ally is, and so on and so forth. And so, in regards to creating an institution, or in this case a congregation, that is inclusive, it's important for us to have the shared understanding of what we're talking about. So that when we talk about transgender, a transgender individual, that we have the right terminology and the right understanding, so that we can have those conversations in a respectful way without offending someone. And as you've seen from some of the panels that you've had, where family members, now we don't know. We may say something thinking that I'm saying this in confidence, and I say something that's offensive against a different group of people, and the person I say it to may have a family member or may have a dear friend from that community. So not only is it wrong for me to do that, but we can also offend those that we think that are just like us if we're not careful with our words. So I do want to, I'm not going to go through every word that was on your list, but I do want us to dwell on about 6 of them that I think are critical in this conversation. And the first one is in regards to privilege, specifically heterosexual privilege. Who would like to read, who thinks that they have the right definition and would like to read it to the group? Okay, let's begin right here. Thank you.
Those benefits derived automatically by being straight that are denied to those who are not. Also, the benefits LGBT people receive as a result of claiming heterosexual identity or denying other sexual or gender identities.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the word privilege in and of itself, sometimes it's triggering for some people, and sometimes when we say that word, it can make some people shut down. But what we are referring to when we talk about privilege, in particular, heterosexual privilege, is the benefits that someone has solely by the fact that they are not lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Now, until recent years, it was really obvious that there was laws that prevented, or lack of laws that allowed for equality. So someone who was lesbian or gay could not get married to the person they loved until recently. And there's some other privileges that these laws have allowed now to individuals who are LGBTQ, or LGBT this evening, which is short for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And what is interesting is that some individuals who may be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender sometimes experience those privileges because they can pass as being not from the community. All right? The next term I want us all to have a shared understanding of is ally. So who would like to read the definition of what an ally is? Okay.
Someone who makes the commitment and effort to recognize their privilege based on gender, class, race, sexual identity, and who works in solidarity with oppressed groups in the struggle for justice.
So I think that's something that is, being an ally is something that's honorable in my mind. And when I think of those people that I respect and admire, they have been allies to either myself or to people in other communities. And I strive to emulate who they are. And an ally is more than just someone who is friends with people from different communities or different groups. But there's the word privilege again, someone who understands that there's inequalities and that they choose to work in solidarity. An ally is not someone who takes the mic from, let's say that I consider myself a huge feminist. But whenever there's a woman speaking, I take the mic from her and I say, we should all be, for equal rights for women, and don't allow that person to share the message and to advocate for, in this case, herself. And so allies don't take the stage. They help lift the voice of those communities who are oppressed and kind of stand in the background. And every major social justice battle in the history of the world has been won with the help of allies. But if we remember, especially in the United States, the recent civil rights wins that we've had, it was individuals from those communities who were advocating, and the allies were there in support. The next term is heterosexism. Who would like to read that definition? Okay.
The belief or assumption that everyone is or should be heterosexual. The idea that being heterosexual is normal, natural, and healthy, and all other people are somehow unnatural, abnormal, and unhealthy.
Thank you. So the reason why this word is included is because one of the aspects of having privilege is not realizing that we have it. And when I presented specifically on heterosexism before, folks who have these ideas are like, well, but I'm not a bad person. Like, what about if, and putting somebody else? What if someone has, sincerely held beliefs that are this? Well, that's fine. This is just what it's called. So that person did not realize that there was a name for that ideology. Just like we have racism and sexism, and we know what those are. Heterosexism is this belief that normal is being heterosexual, and that anything outside of that is abnormal. Okay, so this word, there's a reason why I included this word. And who wants to read this definition? Okay, I'll read this one. A male whose sexual orientation is toward men, or a female whose sexual orientation is towards females. Now, I included this word because this word has roots that are not very nice. It was very much a clinical term to describe someone with a mental disorder. And to some individuals who are LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, this word is extremely, extremely offensive. And so I've included this word here because to this day, I have conversations with individuals who use this word to describe someone who is LGBT. And they don't realize how harmful it is, and so this is a time for us to learn. And so if you are someone who would normally use this word, I just invite you to use the word. Usually the term gay is an umbrella term to describe the community, to use the acronym LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And those are much more inclusive, and they're not as harsh. And like I said, this term can be extremely, extremely offensive and hurtful to individuals from the community. Okay, the next term, who wants to read this definition? Cisgender.
Refers to individuals who have a match between the sex they were assigned at birth, their bodies, and their gender identity.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, going back to privilege, not realizing that there's a term for what those with privilege are. We have the term transgender for those whose gender identity and body does not match, and for those individuals whose gender identity and body does match, the term is cisgender. Okay, queer. Who wants to read this definition? Okay, Julie.
That's right. An umbrella term that, that individuals may use to describe a sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression that does not conform to dominant societal norms.
Thank you. So this word, I do realize that some individuals grew up in a time when this word was extremely offensive and derogatory. And I've included this word for us to talk here because, especially with the younger generation, they are reclaiming this word and using it to describe themselves and their communities in a positive way. So when I say reclaiming the word, is taking away the power from those people who used it in a negative way and saying, you don't hurt me anymore. And there's banners and whatnot of individuals that I've seen says, I'm queer and proud. So you don't hurt me anymore by using this term. And I'm going to use this and I'm going to empower myself. And I'm going to use it to describe my community, and your words don't have an effect on me anymore. So again, I'm including it because you are going to hear, especially in the younger generations, individuals describe themselves as queer. And for some, it's going to sound, it's going to make you cringe, but know that for them, they've taken away all the negativity out of it and are reclaiming the word. Yes?
Is that a term that if an older person or somebody in my generation uses that a younger person would take it negatively though?
So the question was if an older person uses that word when communicating with a younger person, will the younger person be offended if the older person used it? I would say that it's all the tone and how it is used. If it's used in an angry way, in a way that is any way demeaning or belittling, yes. But I wouldn't see someone being offended if it's used in a way that is describing the community in a positive light. Yeah. Very good question. Okay, only a couple more. Actually, 3 more. Yeah, only a couple more. So who wants to do microaggression? Okay, right here.
It says brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial, gender, sexual orientation, and religious slights and insults to the target person or group.
Thank you so much. So, microaggressions are brief and commonplace daily incidents. The way that it was described, actually from that table, was imagine a mosquito bite. One mosquito bite, no big deal. It bothers you for, a few hours, maybe a day. But imagine if you get 20, 30, 40 or more mosquito bites, and how painful and what a discomfort that's going to be. And so a microaggression, asking someone who is married, asking a man who is married to a man, and just in a networking setting, also has your wife because they're wearing a wedding band. Not a big deal. The person didn't mean any harm by that. But whenever that individual gets that question 30 times that night, and several times each day of that week and throughout the year, that can take a toll on that individual. Having to they have to decide: do they out themselves to this person that they're just meeting? Do they say, "Well, I'm actually married to another man," or do they, if they don't feel safe, do they lie and say, "Oh, she's fine," or and so it's a predicament that the person is in that. For the majority of the people, it's not a big deal. We wouldn't even think about it. That person meant no harm. But to the individual, it is. After it's done day in and day out. And so there's a lot of different examples of microaggressions in regards to sexuality and gender identity, not using someone's correct pronouns. I shared the story earlier about the person who is now my friend, and it was hard for me to use they, them, theirs pronouns when referring to an individual that's singular. And I was making a lot of mistakes, and to me, I'm learning this is a new way for me to communicate. But to that person whose identity I was, in a way, disrespecting, discrediting, and it wasn't just from me, but it was from everyone around them, that can take a toll.
Question.
Yes?
This one, maybe you could help me understand, because I've never quite understood this. You said if someone asks you how your wife is, and yet I'm trying to understand in whether it's a gay married couple or a lesbian married couple, they'll often refer to the other as a husband or a wife, even though they're what am I trying to say? A man might refer to his spouse as a wife, or a woman might refer to her female spouse as a husband. And I just want to understand, because I want to do the right thing, and I'm not sure I understand that.
I've never seen that. So I'm not sure what to. Yeah, what I would recommend is going back to the platinum rule and treat others how they want to be treated. So if there's someone that you trust, that that you can inquire and say, I've heard you refer to so-and-so as your wife. And I was really curious, why do you do that? I just want to be respectful. If you know them, trust them, and if not, if you hear them saying that, then I just go back to the platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. So if they're referring to themselves as that.
I probably wouldn't ask why. I would just do what they wanted me to do. They don't have to explain it. I just.
Yeah.
But I have heard that many times, actually.
Okay. Well, that's. I didn't realize it was a thing. But again, going back to the platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. Did someone want to comment on that?
I think the key is just to ask. I mean, when I get asked, I teach at a school,
And my students will say, you know, who are you married to? And I mean, these little small people, they know at 10 years old, don't assume that I'm married to a man. And do the same. I mean, if I walked up to, I'm looking for a wedding ring. If I walked up to you and say, tell me about your spouse, I don't have to use husband or wife. And then she's going to say, well, my husband or my wife or whatever. I mean, it's a great opportunity to know people. Just ask.
Exactly.
Most of us aren't offended.
Right. And the word spouse is such a powerful word to use that, you know, again, we have to retrain ourselves to use that word casually, but if we can, then we are becoming more inclusive and potentially not having microaggressions. Yes?
Well, let me ask you this. I've heard they just say, this is my partner, as opposed to saying, this is my husband, this is my wife. That's how I've always heard it. When they describe who they're married to, this is my partner.
Yeah.
So is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that before marriage equality, I think that was a word that was used much more commonly because people were not legally married. But I would say that I've heard straight friends who are with, a female with a male, refer to each other as partners as well. And now they're younger, they're in their 20s, but so yeah, spouse, partner, wife, husband, well, everyone uses slightly different terminology. The last word, and we'll move on because we're almost out of time, really is inclusion. And inclusion is authentically and intentionally bringing traditionally excluded individuals and groups into processes, activities, and decision policy making in a way that shares power. There's a lot of things right there, but I only have with you 5 more minutes. So, sharing power, that is one critical component of the definition of inclusion. Inclusion is not merely enough saying you're welcome here, but is there a seat at the table for you to discuss, and is your voice heard when you speak? And are you put in a place where you share power with everyone who's there with you equally? Okay, so in closing, I just want to talk about the traits of inclusion. Again, we can look at this very at the core of the individual, but we can also look at this institutional and for organizations, and in your case, congregations. So the traits for inclusive leadership are this: commitment to being inclusive. There's going to be shortfalls, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be faults. But are we committed to being an inclusive congregation, inclusive community for the long haul? Courage. I'm so impressed with Urban Wicks, with Boston Avenue, for having the courage to have these conversations at this time. Inclusive leadership is not popular. It takes courage to be inclusive. And I'm excited to see what you are going to do in the future in Tulsa because of your courageous commitment to inclusivity. And so yeah, I just leave it at that. Cognizance of bias, again, looking at our lenses, trying to understand why we do the things that we do and why we're losing shape, and being aware, self-aware of not only ourselves, but our history as an organization, our history as a city, and what dark chapters are there in Tulsa that have put some groups outside of the narrative. Curiosity, wanting to learn. The beauty and the challenge about inclusion is that there's never enough boxes that you can check. There's never enough knowledge that you can acquire to say I'm an inclusive person. There's always more. And again, that's the beauty of this work, is that we can continue to grow and enrich our lives. Which is also a challenge because sometimes we get complacent and we say we've done enough and there's more to do. Cultural intelligence, and lastly, collaboration. So, I'm gonna finish with this quote, again from Bishop O, and this was in his response to the Charlottesville protests. This is the moment for the United Methodist Church and all peoples of faith to be bold in our witness against racism and white supremacy. The vision of the beloved community lies not behind us, but before us. I urge us to pray for the Holy Spirit to break through and work through the United Methodist Church to heal our broken world and make tangible, visible the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. So thank you for engaging in this divine work of making sure that everyone feels like they're part of the community of God. Thank you so much.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to give you time. There's an evaluation or a feedback form on your table. Really appreciate it if you have information you want to give us, to put that on the page there. Turn those in. The questions I responded to when we first began this evening were from the session feedback form last week. So if you'll fill this one out, plus it pushes us forward in terms of where we might go next in our work, whether it's through our work area in church and society, our interfaith concerns work area. Any number of groups within the church can use this feedback for their ongoing work in terms of how we work together and education that people are asking for. So we appreciate that very much. There's a number of handouts about upcoming events or groups in the church, things that are going on, as well as some on the back table on your way out. If you missed the first session on the biblical foundations and what the Bible says about sexuality, those are standing up in praise on the back table as well. Dr. Lisa Davison kicked us off 4 weeks ago, did a great job with the biblical foundation material. So if you missed one of those, encourage you to pick those up. Also, our communications department's working on getting each of these sessions on the website. So the first two have been edited and posted. The first three, Haley's telling me, have been edited now and posted. After this evening, later this week, she'll work on this one as well. The interactive ones are a little more difficult to edit, to make sense of it if you're watching it and you weren't a part of it. So she's working on that so people know what the questions were and what was happening when they were watching the video. So anyway, all four of those will be up and available for people to watch. So if you have anyone ask you about that, just direct them to bostonavenue.org and they can learn more about what these discussions are all about. Or if you missed one and like to catch up on it, you can do so as well. Any questions before we close? I'll give you a couple of minutes to finish your seat and then I'll give us a benediction. All right. I hear you're beginning to finish up on those. Also, one quick follow-up. Some who've been participating out of our church wanted to have a support group or discussion group going forward, particularly for families dealing with these issues that were wanting more conversation. And so Josh Payton's right back here. He's one of the people that's going to help facilitate that, and his wife. There's a handout on your table talking about when and where that is, but it's going to be Tuesday nights here in this building upstairs on the 4th floor. You're invited if you know other families, even if they're not a part of our church family, but you think from what they have said that they would find some kind of support or discussion group helpful for their own family process. You can have them call the church. And we can give them information about that, or they can come to the first session and be a part of that on Tuesday night, November the 7th. So that'll be starting here in a couple of weeks. Would you stand and receive the benediction? Oh God, you are our Creator. We are your children. We give you thanks that you love us, that you've brought us to this moment. We give you thanks for this community and the love and support, the acceptance, the encouragement we receive from one another. Help us to recognize in our diversity, oh God, your face and your kingdom. And send us out with your love to be your people in all we say and do. And let all the people say, amen. Go in peace. Thank you for being here.